Alright guys, in the last video we set up the boilerplate for Redux, our store, and we created our root reducer. So you can see in our reducers folder we have our root reducer, which is index.js. We created a contact reducer, which doesn't really have anything in it, just its initial state and the default function. So what I want to do in this video is I want to move our contacts from the component. They're stuck right now in the contacts.js component. We want to move them to our reducer into the initial state. Okay, and then we want to be able to get the contacts and show them here as they are now, except from Redux, not from the component. So let's start off by going to contacts.js and just grabbing just this whole contacts array. So we'll go ahead and cut that out. We'll get rid of the state, just like we did back when we were working with context. And we'll go to our reducer and we'll put this right here. And it's gonna get an error because it's still looking for contacts in the component state and it's no longer there. So in our initial state, we'll go ahead and paste in our contacts. And we're gonna need a way to get them. Now with Redux, we need to define something called types, action types. So just like where in the context we had, remember the delete underscore contact, add underscore contact, we need to do that, but we actually define them as constants in a file. And what I like to do is I like to put a file called types in my actions folder. Okay, we don't have an actions folder yet, but we're going to create one. So let's go ahead and create a folder called actions. And inside, whoops, it shouldn't be in reducer, that's wrong. It should be just right in the source folder. So in the source folder we should have actions, and inside actions let's create a file called types.js. Now in here what we need to do is define a couple constants that are equal to the type, which is just a string. So we're going to say export const, and we want to call this get underscore contacts. And we're going to set it to just a simple string of the same thing, get underscore contacts. So this gives us a central place for all of our types. And we didn't do this in the context API, we just simply put the string in there. But in Redux we want to actually have these as variables or inside of a file. So now what we'll do in the reducer, let's import that get contacts from the type. So we'll say import, and we want get contacts, and that's going to be from, whoa, too many quotes there. And let's see, where are we? So we're in the contact reducer, so we want to go up one. Let's see, we want to go into actions, and we want to go into the types file. Okay, and then down here, just like we did with the context API, we're going to have a type of get contacts. Okay, so actually we didn't have a type of get contacts in context, we just directly grabbed it from the state. But here we're going to have an action that gets them. So let's say get, case get contacts, and for this case we just want to return, and for now we're just going to return the current state. So I'm going to use the spread operator and just return state. That's all we're going to do for now. Later on, we're going to get them from the JSON placeholder API. For now, we're just going to return these. So we have our reducer, we have our action type of get contacts, which just returns a state. Now, how do we get this into our contacts component? So the way that we need to do this is we need to bring in something called connect from React Redux. Okay, React Redux is what takes care of connecting React to Redux, and there's something called connect we need to bring in. So let's say import from React Redux, and we want to bring in connect. Okay, we're also going to bring in prop types. So let's say impt tab, and we'll bring in prop types. And the reason for that is because when we have an action, it's called as a prop. When we bring in anything from the Redux state, it's put into props. So we want prop types. Now, in order to use connect, we have to go down to the bottom here, and instead of exporting the component directly, we need to export connect, put some parentheses here, and then wrap the component name in parentheses. Okay, now inside the connect parameters, we put two things. First is anything that we want to map from the Redux state to props in the component. Second is anything we want to dispatch. Okay, so any actions that we want to dispatch. So let's create two variables here. One is going to be called map state to props. And this is going to be an arrow function. It takes in the state. And then we're going to set it to a set of parentheses with some curly braces. And we want to get contacts. Okay, now we can access this from the state, from the Redux state dot contact, and then dot contacts. Now this might look a little weird, but what you have to remember is that our reducer, remember we called it contact? So if we go to the root reducer, right here is where we called it contact. You can also see it in our, if I can grab this, oh, I'm grabbing the wrong line. We can also see it in our state right here, contact. Inside there we have contacts. So that's what I'm getting at here. So state.contact and then the contacts array, and I'm going to put that into a prop in this component called contact. So I should be able to access it with this dot props dot contacts like that. If I wanted to call this whatever test, then I could get the contacts in this dot props dot test. So I'm assigning it right here. All right, hopefully that makes sense. So we're mapping the state from Redux to a local component property. Now, if we want to basically fire off an action, such as like we want to call this get contacts so that we can get the initial contacts, we need to create a variable here. And this is just one way of doing it. I'm going to show you another way of doing it after. And like I've said a couple times, you can do the same thing a million different ways in React. But a lot of people will create a constant or a function called map dispatch to props. And this takes in dispatch. Okay, and then we're going to set that to some parentheses with curly braces, and we're going to say get contacts. That's going to be basically the name of our action or our function, and set this to an arrow, and then call dispatch, and then pass in an action, which is an object with a type of get underscore contacts. Now we haven't brought in get contacts to this file, which we have to do. Before we were just using the actual string, but now we need to use the type. So we're going to go up here and say import get contacts, and that's going to be from, let's see, we want to go outside twice into actions, right? No, where are we? Contacts, out. Yeah, so it should be in actions. Oh, I need quotes. So actions / types. Okay, so get contacts. So we're calling it here. All right, now we need to pass both of these functions into connect. So first is map state to props. Second is map dispatch to props. Now we just want to finish up with our prop types here. So let's say contacts dot prop types, and we're going to set this to an object, and we have contacts, which we're bringing in from the state. So prop types, and this is going to be an array. Okay, so it's an array and it is required. Now the function, or the action I should say, of get contacts is also going to be in the props. So that's also a prop. So we want to say get contacts, except that's going to be a function. So we want to do func, and we'll say is required. Okay, so those are our prop types. Now we need to just call this get contacts. Where do we want to do this? We want to do this in the component did mount lifecycle method. Just like, remember when we made the Ajax calls from the component, that we make our action calls. If we want it to call when the component is mounted, then that's where we want to put it. So let's say component did mount, and we can say this dot props dot get contacts. Okay, now once we call this, it's going to put the contacts into the props. Right here, we're trying to get it from the component state, which doesn't exist anymore. So we simply want to change this now to props, this dot props, because we have access to this dot props dot contacts because of this right here. We're pulling them from the state. So let's go ahead and save this, and let's see if this works, and it does. Okay, so now we're actually getting the contacts from Redux, and you can see right here it calls the action. Okay, so this is the action that was called when the page load, get contacts, and it's being called from the reducer here, and it's just returning the initial state. So if I say John Doe 1 inside the reducer here and save, you'll see that it will show John Doe 1 here. So we know that we're getting it from Redux as opposed to just in the component. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. I know that Redux is a tough thing to learn. The idea of it is pretty easy, application state as opposed to individual component state, but the setup, the different terminology like reducers and actions and types, it's very confusing, and I find it very hard to explain. So hopefully you guys can at least grasp, the gist of it. And as we move along, you'll learn more. All right, so that's it for this video, guys. I will see you in the next one.